School headmaster Robert Harrison was not pleased with Princess Diana's unexpected visit. When Diana began asking questions about bullying issues at their school, Harrison became defensive. "There are no problems at this school," he protested. "Royal visits disrupt our children." But the truth Diana would discover would turn Harrison's world upside down. What a 12-year-old student told Diana would change everything. The morning fog was just beginning to lift from the playground of St. Andrew's Primary School as Princess Diana's unmarked car pulled up to the gates. It was March 1995, and Diana had deliberately chosen to arrive unannounced without the usual fanfare that accompanied royal visits. She had spent weeks reading disturbing reports about rising bullying incidents in British schools, and she wanted to see the reality for herself. Diana had dressed simply in a navy blazer and skirt, hoping to blend in as much as possible. Victoria Ashworth, her private secretary, had strongly advised against this impromptu visit, warning that school officials preferred advance notice to prepare properly. Sometimes, Diana had replied, the most honest conversations happen when people haven't had time to prepare their official responses. As Diana walked through the school's main entrance, she was immediately struck by the atmosphere. Unlike the cheerful, welcoming environment she had expected, the corridors felt tense. Children moved quickly between classes, heads down, avoiding eye contact. She noticed several students with bruises, others who seemed withdrawn and fearful. "Can I help you?" A stern voice interrupted her observations. Diana turned to face a tall, imposing man in his early 50s. His receding hairline and wire-rimmed glasses gave him an authoritative appearance that was clearly intended to intimidate. His name tag read Robert Harrison, Headmaster. "I'm Diana Spencer," she said, using her maiden name as she sometimes did when she wanted to avoid immediate recognition. "I was hoping to speak with someone about the school's policies regarding student welfare." Harrison studied her face for a moment, and she saw the exact moment recognition dawned. His expression shifted from suspicion to barely concealed annoyance. "Princess Diana," he said, his tone decidedly unwelcoming. "This is highly irregular. Royal visits require advanced scheduling through proper channels." Diana felt her first flash of irritation at his dismissive attitude. "I'm not here for a royal visit, Mr. Harrison. I'm here as someone concerned about children's well-being." "Our children's well-being is perfectly managed, thank you," Harrison replied curtly. "We don't need royal interference in our educational processes." The bluntness of his response caught Diana off guard. She was accustomed to deference, even from those who disagreed with her privately. "I'm not here to interfere," Diana said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I've been reading concerning reports about bullying in schools, and I wanted to understand how institutions like yours are addressing these challenges." Harrison's face darkened. "Bullying? Princess Diana, I think you've been reading too much sensationalized media coverage. This school has an exemplary disciplinary record. Then you won't mind if I observe some classes and speak with a few students?" "Actually, I would mind very much," Harrison said, his voice rising slightly. "Royal visits disrupt our children's learning environment. They create unnecessary excitement and distraction." Diana felt her anger building. "Mr. Harrison, are you telling me that you refuse to let me see how your school operates?" "I'm telling you," Harrison said, moving closer and lowering his voice, "that we don't need outsiders coming in here and looking for problems that don't exist. This is a well-run institution, and I won't have it subjected to the kind of media circus that follows you everywhere." Diana stared at him, feeling a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Problems that don't exist? Mr. Harrison, child bullying is a documented crisis in British schools. Are you seriously suggesting that your school is somehow immune to this issue?" "I'm suggesting," Harrison said, his tone becoming condescending, "that some people see problems where none exist because it serves their need for publicity." The accusation hit Diana like a slap. "Publicity? You think I'm here for publicity? Aren't you?" Harrison challenged. "When was the last time you visited a school without photographers? When was the last time you actually spent time understanding the complexities of education, rather than making speeches about issues you don't really comprehend?" Diana felt her composure crack. "You don't know anything about what I comprehend, Mr. Harrison." "Don't I?" Harrison's voice was getting louder, and several passing teachers had begun to notice the heated exchange. I know that you show up at institutions like ours, take some photos with carefully selected children, make some inspiring comments about the importance of education, and then leave us to deal with the disruption your visit has caused. That's not what I'm doing here, Diana protested. Then what are you doing here? Harrison demanded. Because if you're looking for a bullying crisis to champion, you've come to the wrong school. Just then a commotion erupted from down the hallway. Diana and Harrison both turned to see a group of children gathered around what appeared to be some kind of altercation. A teacher, Mrs. Linda Thompson, was hurrying toward the scene. Nothing to see here, Harrison said quickly, moving to block Diana's view. Just normal childhood disagreement. But Diana had already started walking toward the disturbance. What she saw made her heart sink. A small girl, probably around 12 years old, was standing against a wall surrounded by three larger children. The girl's school uniform was disheveled, her books scattered on the floor, and there were tears streaming down her face. "Give us your lunch money, Amy," one of the older boys was saying. "You know what happens if you don't." Mrs. Thompson reached the scene just as Diana did. "Boys, that's enough. Get to your classes immediately." The bullies dispersed quickly when they saw the adults approaching, but the damage was clearly done. The girl Amy was shaking as she tried to collect her scattered belongings. "Amy Fletcher," Mrs. Thompson said gently, "are you all right, dear?" Diana knelt down beside Amy, helping her gather her books. "Hello, Amy, I'm Diana. What just happened here?" Amy looked up with frightened eyes. "Nothing, miss. Just nothing." Harrison had caught up to them and was clearly agitated. "Mrs. Thompson, please escort Amy to class." "Princess Diana, I think it's time for you to leave." But Diana wasn't moving. She could see the fear in Amy's eyes, the way the child kept glancing nervously at Harrison, the telltale signs of someone who had been threatened into silence. "Amy," Diana said softly, "has this happened before?" "Amy doesn't need to answer that," Harrison interjected quickly. "This was an isolated incident that we'll handle internally." "Mr. Harrison," Diana said, standing up slowly, "I think Amy should be allowed to speak." The tension in the hallway was palpable. Mrs. Thompson looked uncomfortable, clearly caught between her headmaster's authority and what she was witnessing. Several other teachers had gathered at a distance, watching the unprecedented confrontation. Amy looked between Diana and Harrison, clearly torn between fear and a desperate need to be heard. "It's all right, Amy," Diana said gently. "You can tell me the truth." "Princess Diana," Harrison said sharply, "you're interfering with school discipline. I must insist that you leave immediately." "I'm not leaving until I understand what's happening here," Diana replied, her voice firm. Amy suddenly spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "It happens every day." Harrison's face went white. "Amy, that's enough." But Amy had found her courage. "They take my lunch money every day. And if I don't have money, they push me down or hit me. And when I told my mom and she came to complain, Mr. Harrison said I was making it up." The silence that followed was deafening. Diana looked at Harrison, whose face had turned red with embarrassment and anger. "Is this true, Mr. Harrison?" Diana asked. "The child is clearly confused," Harrison said defensively. "Children often exaggerate normal playground interactions." "Normal?" Diana's voice was incredulous. "Mr. Harrison, extortion and physical violence are not normal playground interactions." Mrs. Thompson stepped forward. "Your Royal Highness, if I may, Amy isn't the only child who's reported these incidents. We've had several complaints from parents, but," she glanced nervously at Harrison, "they haven't been taken seriously." Harrison looked furious. "Mrs. Thompson, you're speaking out of turn." But Mrs. Thompson seemed to have found her courage as well. "No, Mr. Harrison, I've been teaching here for 15 years, and I've watched this problem get worse while we've pretended it doesn't exist." Diana felt a surge of determination. "Mr. Harrison, I want to speak with Amy privately, and I want to speak with any other children who might have similar experiences." "Absolutely not," Harrison said. "I forbid it." Diana turned to face him fully. "You forbid it? Mr. Harrison, these children are being harmed under your care. And you want to prevent them from getting help? These children are not being harmed, Harrison insisted. They're experiencing normal social challenges that are part of growing up. Normal? Diana's voice was rising now. Amy is being extorted for money every day, and you call that normal? By now, their argument had attracted the attention of more staff and some curious students. Diana was acutely aware that this confrontation was becoming very public, but she found she didn't care. Princess Diana, Harrison said, trying to regain control of the situation, you're creating a disturbance. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. I'm creating a disturbance? Diana was incredulous. Harrison, children are being terrorized in your school, and you're more concerned about my presence than their safety. That's not. These situations are more complex than they appear. Then explain the complexity to me, Diana challenged. Explain how allowing children to be physically and emotionally abused serves any educational purpose. Harrison looked around at the gathering crowd of teachers and students, clearly realizing that his handling of the situation was being witnessed by his entire staff. This conversation should take place in my office, he said stiffly. No, Diana replied. This conversation should take place wherever Amy and the other affected children feel safe enough to speak honestly. Mrs. Thompson spoke up again. Your Royal Highness, there's a quiet room in the library where Amy might feel more comfortable. Diana nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Amy, would you be willing to tell me more about what you've been experiencing? Amy looked at Harrison fearfully, then back at Diana. Will I get in trouble? Not from me, Diana said firmly. And if anyone tries to punish you for telling the truth, they'll have to answer to me. Harrison opened his mouth to protest, but Diana cut him off. Mr. Harrison, you have a choice. You can continue trying to cover up these problems, or you can work with me to solve them. But I'm not leaving until I understand the full scope of what's happening here. What followed was unlike any school visit Diana had ever experienced. Over the next 3 hours, she spoke with Amy and several other children who had been victims of bullying. The stories she heard were heartbreaking and consistent. Systematic intimidation, theft, physical violence, and emotional abuse that had been dismissed by school administrators as normal childhood behavior. Amy's story was particularly disturbing. She explained that a group of older students had been targeting younger children for months, demanding money, food, and homework. When victims complained to teachers, they were told to work it out themselves or accused of tattling. My mom came to see Mr. Harrison 3 times, Amy told Diana, but he said I was being dramatic and that kids need to learn to handle conflicts on their own. Diana also spoke with Sophie Bennett, Amy's friend, who had witnessed many of the incidents. Sophie explained that children had stopped reporting bullying because they knew nothing would be done. The teachers know what's happening, Sophie said, but Mr. Harrison tells them not to make a big deal about it. He says it makes the school look bad. As Diana gathered more information, she began to understand that this wasn't just a case of overlooked bullying incident. It was a systematic policy of denial and cover-up that prioritized the school's reputation over student safety. Mrs. Thompson, emboldened by Diana's presence, revealed that several teachers had tried to address the bullying problem but had been discouraged by Harrison. We've proposed anti-bullying programs, peer mediation systems, better supervision during breaks, Mrs. Thompson explained, but Mr. Harrison rejects everything, saying it would imply that we have problems that need solved. When Diana finally confronted Harrison again, she was armed with detailed accounts from multiple children and several frustrated teachers. Mr. Harrison, she said, I've now heard from 8 different children and 4 teachers about systematic bullying that's been going on for months. How do you explain that? Harrison, clearly backed into a corner, finally dropped his defensive facade. Princess Diana, you don't understand the pressures we're under. School inspections, league tables, reputation management. Admitting to bullying problems would destroy this school's standing. And what about the children's standing? Diana asked. What about their right to feel safe in school? "Of course I care about the children," Harrison said. "But there are larger considerations. If word gets out that we have serious bullying problems, parents will withdraw their children. Our funding will be cut. The school could be closed." Diana stared at him. "So you're sacrificing the children who are here now to protect the school's future?" "I'm trying to balance competing priorities," Harrison said weakly. "Harrison," Diana said, "there is no balance when it comes to child safety. Either children are safe in your school, or they're not. Everything else is secondary." The conversation that followed was difficult but transformative. Harrison, faced with undeniable evidence and Diana's unwavering commitment to the children's welfare, finally began to acknowledge the scope of the problem. "I suppose," he said eventually, "I convinced myself that if I didn't acknowledge the bullying officially, it wasn't really a serious issue. But it was serious," Diana pointed out. "It was serious to Amy, to Sophie, to all the children who've been suffering while you looked the other way." Harrison sat down heavily in his chair. "I've been headmaster here for 12 years. I thought I was protecting the school." "You were protecting the institution," Diana corrected. "But institutions exist to serve people, not the other way around." What Diana proposed next surprised Harrison. Instead of exposing the school's failures publicly, she wanted to work with him to create a comprehensive anti-bullying program that could serve as a model for other schools. "You made mistakes," Diana told him, "but you can learn from them. The question is, are you willing to put children's safety ahead of your own reputation?" The program they developed together included immediate intervention for current bullying situations, training for all staff on recognizing and addressing bullying, peer support systems, and regular anonymous reporting mechanisms that allowed children to report problems without fear of retaliation. Most importantly, it included a fundamental shift in the school's culture. Instead of viewing bullying reports as problems to be minimized, they would be treated as opportunities to protect children and create a safer environment. Harrison also agreed to a partnership with Diana's charitable foundation to fund additional counseling services and to share the school's experience with other institutions facing similar challenges. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was remarkable. Within 6 months, Andrews had become known not for covering up bullying, but for having one of the most comprehensive anti-bullying programs in the country. Amy Fletcher, the girl whose courage had sparked the entire transformation, became one of the program's most effective advocates. She spoke at assemblies about the importance of reporting bullying and supporting victims. "Princess Diana taught me that telling the truth isn't tattling," Amy would tell younger students. "It's protecting yourself and other people." Ms. Thompson was promoted to deputy head with special responsibility for student welfare. She worked closely with Diana to develop training materials that were eventually used by schools across the country. Harrison himself became an unlikely advocate for honest assessment of school problems. He spoke at education conferences about the dangers of prioritizing reputation over student safety. "I learned," he would tell other head teachers, "that covering up problems doesn't make them go away. It just makes them worse. And it betrays the trust that parents place in us to keep their children safe." But perhaps the most significant change was in Harrison's relationship with his students. No longer the intimidating authority figure who dismissed their concerns, he became known for listening to children and taking their worries seriously. Diana continued her association with St. Andrews, but in a completely different capacity than her traditional royal visit. She attended staff meetings, participated in program evaluations, and maintained personal relationships with children like Amy and Sophie. "You know what I learned that day?" Diana would later reflect. "Sometimes the most important fights are the ones that start with someone telling you you're wrong." Harrison's anger forced me to really look at what was happening, and my anger forced him to stop hiding from the truth. The heated confrontation that had seemed so destructive in the moment had actually been the beginning of one of Diana's most successful interventions. It had shown her that real change required real commitment to uncomfortable truths and difficult conversation. Harrison would often think about that day as well. "Princess Diana could have destroyed my career," he would tell colleagues. "Instead, she helped me save it by forcing me to do the job I should have been doing all along." Years later, when people asked about the key to successful anti-bullying programs, both Diana and Harrison would give the same answer: honest assessment of problems, immediate action to protect children, and the courage to put children's welfare ahead of all other considerations. The defensive response that had seemed so natural to Harrison, protecting the school's reputation at all costs, had nearly destroyed everything he claimed to be protecting. Diana's willingness to confront uncomfortable truths had saved not just the children who were being bullied, but the school itself. And it had proven that sometimes the most unexpected alliances come from the most heated disagreements, when both sides are finally willing to put aside their defensiveness and work together for something larger than themselves.